Let's bring in MS Now senior national security reporter David Rohde, along with Kevin Barron, founder of Elevation Global Strategies and former vice president of the Pentagon Press Association, and retired U.S. Army Major John Spencer, who served 2 tours in Iraq. He's also chair of war studies at the Madison Policy Forum. David, let's start with the reporting. Leaving the White House yesterday, Machado said Venezuelans could count on President Trump for their freedom. Did yesterday's meeting and Machado giving Trump her Nobel Peace Prize change anything inside Venezuela or in the White House, for that matter?
Based on the public statements out of the White House, it did not change anything. Carolyn Levitt was asked during a press briefing about if there are dates set for elections or whether Machado, whose party won the most recent elections, would be taking power. And Levitt said no date has been set for elections. So the White House signal seems to be they want to work with Rodriguez, the acting president, the very close ally of Maduro, focus on getting oil out of the country, and democracy will come later.
Major Spencer, a U.S. official, confirms to MS Now that CIA Director Ratcliffe traveled to Caracas yesterday to meet with this interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, who was the vice president under Maduro. On one side, you've got the president meeting with Machado, the opposition leader. On the other, you have Ratcliffe meeting with Rodriguez. Is President Trump's plan for Venezuela and its future any clearer?
No, I think he's leaving himself options, and the administration in general, of sticking to the messaging. This wasn't about regime change. This was a law enforcement exercise. Of course, the United States wants more influence, wants the sanctions to be upheld, the shadow fleet. But regime change are messy. And while Machado did win the most recent election, I think the United States is waiting and seeing how things develop. Now that you've had this major change, you have the current administration actually doing the things that the United States is talking about: stop sending the drugs, stop with the shadow fleet, start doing things for the Venezuelan people. And maybe we see another election or a democratic process later. But I think the administration is keeping their cards close on, we're waiting to see, and it's going in a positive direction, I would say.
So you see it in a positive way. A lot of others that have been on this air certainly are concerned about the president propping up the Maduro regime, even without Maduro in that chair right now, instead of giving more power to the opposition party that, as you point out, rightfully won the last election, according to the U.S. administration even. Kevin, the Office of the UN's High Commissioner for Human Rights is now saying it's alarmed by America's use of lethal force in the Caribbean and inside Venezuela, calling it gravely concerning. What's your reaction to that? What does this mean for how the world may be seeing the U.S. military in this moment?
Well, I think, thanks to the UN for pointing that out, but the administration couldn't care less, especially about the United Nations. Clearly the world is alarmed and is taking steps that reflect it. If you look at, up in Greenland, what was supposed to be a benign exercise has become a show of force by America's closest allies to signal to the United States, don't invade our continent, our land, our partners here. And you've seen allies avoid getting involved with the United States in Venezuela. These are the United States is supposed to be shoulder to shoulder with its allies and leading the world when they do military operations, not going out on their own like this. So I think it's a nice gesture, legal. I don't know what you want to call it from the UN agency, and I think it's great, but it has no weight with this White House or in Washington.
We'll continue to watch for any remarks from Machado. In the meantime, there's new developments in Iran. The U.S. announcing new sanctions yesterday. David, what are these new sanctions? Is this an off-ramp?
They are sanctions against the individuals that the Trump administration says is responsible or played a role in the crackdown against protests there. It's quiet again today in Iran, but this is largely, it's seen as quiet as because of the huge number that were killed. It's at least 2,500 Iranians that were killed. Those are just protesters, another 150 security personnel who died. And this is the bloodiest crackdown in Iran since the Islamic Republic took power in 1979. So the sanctions are against certain leaders, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the right-wing group there. But I don't think the sanctions will have much of an impact. It's a symbolic thing. It's good to punish them, but I don't think this will deter the Iranians. There was reporting by the New York Times about Israel and Arab countries in the region asking the U.S. to not carry out strikes. So it appears there won't be any strikes imminently in Iran. That's, I think, more of the off-ramp than the sanctions.
Yeah, those Arab nations and Israel reportedly are concerned that Iran would take retaliatory action against their countries should the U.S. carry out some kind of military operation against Iran. Major, do you see that as a likely scenario? And would the U.S. even be prepared to respond with the current level of forces in the region right now after moving many assets to the Caribbean?
I mean, I do think it's a likelihood from this regime who has been reckless in the past and attacking other nations, to include Qatar and the U.S. forces in the region. But I think the United States, again, wants to have more options on the table, and that's why it's sending a carrier strike group, the U.S. Abraham Lincoln, to the region to be able to do just what you mentioned, that, yes, the United States has assets to assist the protesters if that was a kinetic strike, or cyber assets, or increase the communication, things that I would like to see supporting the 92 million Iranians that don't want this regime. But also understanding even the Iranian Revolution from 1978 to 1979 took a year of this type of activity. But the United States wants more options. Absolutely, I believe the regime is a credible threat to other nations surrounding it, and a threat to the protesters. While it says it stopped killing protesters at the moment, that doesn't mean that's going to continue to do that. And the United States wants more options, and a carrier strike group would provide a lot more options for protecting nations against Iran.
Kevin, before we go, I want to ask you about this new overhaul announced yesterday to the legacy military newspaper Stars and Stripes, where you used to report. The Pentagon says the changes will ensure the independent paper is, quote, tailored to our warfighters, writing no more repurposed DC gossip columns, no more Associated Press reprints. What's the impact? How does this serve the American public, especially with the media presence at the Pentagon already really cut back?
Well, it doesn't serve the public or the troops. It serves Pete Hegseth and the administration. Look, yes, I was a reporter and photographer for Stars and Stripes for about 3 years at the start of the Obama administration, and the resurge back into Afghanistan. And it's ingrained in reporters' heads when you get there. You are a government employee, you work for the U.S. Army, you're an Army civilian, and you have absolute editorial independence protected by Congress for this very reason. I tell folks the shorthand is, if you ever saw Full Metal Jacket, Matthew Modine's character is a Stars and Stripes reporter. And in the opening scene when they get to Vietnam is an editorial meeting where the leader of the paper is trying to fake the news and tell them to go ahead and put some kills in there, make it look like an officer. So it's the experience of Vietnam that led to Congress putting into law these protections so that troops are ensured that they will get good information when they're downrange. And you can't swap out USA Today. You can't tell them to go online when they're in a combat outpost in a far field that doesn't have those options to them. They're supposed to be served by the Defense Department this way, and it's in law. And I don't know how to characterize it other than in any other way than illegal what they're trying to do.
It's the journalist's job to report the truth, the facts, and there are important implications and reasons for that. Thank you so much, Kevin Barron, David Rode, and Major John Spencer. It's good to have you all with us.